The smell of pancakes still lingered in the kitchen when my daughter's voice cut through the lazy Sunday air like a blade. "Mom, Victor drives better. You're too old for this car." I was still setting down the orange juice when the words landed. My hand trembled for a second, then steadied. At the table, Sienna sat straight backed, her manicured fingers already reaching toward the keys I had left on the counter. She smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile I remembered from her childhood. It was sharp, practiced, the kind of smile people wear when they want the world to see a performance. Before I could speak, she rose from her chair and crossed the kitchen in 2 long strides. The keys jingled once in her hand. I felt the sound in my chest like a slap. "Victor deserves it," she added, glancing toward her father-in-law. "You know how much experience he has behind the wheel. It's safer this way." Victor, a man I barely tolerated at family gatherings, puffed his chest as if he'd just been knighted. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket, trying to look modest, but failing. His eyes gleamed at the sight of the fob in his daughter-in-law's hand. "Tyler." My son-in-law lifted his phone and aimed it at me, smirking. "Just a quick memory for the family album," he said, tapping record. I stared at my daughter, the girl I had once carried to kindergarten, who had clung to my leg when thunder rolled at night, now stood before me, orchestrating my humiliation. "You're too old," she repeated, almost rehearsed, as though she wanted the words captured clearly on her husband's recording. I felt the sting, yes. But more than that, I felt the curious calm I'd learned over decades of working in safety engineering. In moments of crisis, you breathe first. You calculate second. You act third. So, I breathed. Victor extended his hand, palm up like a priest expecting an offering. Sienna placed the keys in his hand with a flourish, as though awarding a trophy. Tyler chuckled behind his phone. "There you go," she said. Finally, in hands that know what they're doing, I folded the napkin in my lap, smoothing the edges, as if I were nothing more than a hostess fussing with details. My eyes stayed on the tablecloth, but in my mind, I saw the blinking red dot of the GPS tracker I had installed last week. I heard the whir of the dash cam that never stopped uploading to the cloud. I remembered the insurance policy sitting in my desk drawer, signed and notarized. Victor pocketed the fob and turned toward the door. "Don't worry, Nora," he said. "I'll take care of it like it's my own." Sienna laughed lightly, draping an arm over his shoulder. "It's for your own good, Mom. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word burned in my ears. I rose from the table slowly, careful not to let the anger show in my stride. At the window, I watched as Victor slid into the driver's seat of my metallic blue BMW. He adjusted the mirrors with a smug familiarity that told me this wasn't a spontaneous idea. Sienna leaned against the porch rail, Tyler filming every second, the two of them whispering like conspirators. The engine purred to life. My car, my one indulgence, my prize after a lifetime of sacrifice, rolled down the driveway under someone else's hands. I let my face fall into an expression. They wanted to see the defeated mother, too fragile to argue, too weary to resist. They wanted a picture of victory. I gave it to them. But behind the glass of that window, my hands were steady. My breathing even. My mind already working through the sequence of steps that would turn this performance upside down. They thought they'd taken my car. What they'd really done was set the opening scene of their own undoing. When the sound of my BMW disappeared down the street, I found myself drifting backward through time. It wasn't just a car pulling away. It was 18 months of sacrifice, calculation, and stubborn determination. For decades, I drove whatever would get me from home to work and back. Old sedans with rust creeping up the doors, minivans that rattled with every turn, hand-me-downs that coughed smoke in the morning. My paycheck had gone to bills, braces, Sienna's textbooks, mortgage payments. One day, I used to whisper to myself at red lights, hands gripping a worn steering wheel, one day, I'll drive something that isn't a compromise. That day didn't come until I turned 55. Retirement papers were filed, and the consulting calls started trickling in small contracts, weekend projects, enough to keep my mind sharp and my savings growing. Every check went into a separate account, one I didn't touch for groceries or utilities. I tracked each deposit like a soldier counting rations. Slowly, the numbers added up. When the balance finally matched the figure taped to my fridge, $85,000, I walked into the Bavarian dealership downtown with a steadiness that belied the storm inside me. The showroom smelled of leather and polish. Rows of cars gleamed under bright lights, but my eyes locked instantly on the metallic blue BMW tucked against the far wall. The color reminded me of the Oregon coast in late summer, endless and defiant. The salesman spoke, but his voice blurred into background noise. I ran my hand along the curve of the hood, cool and flawless under my fingers. For once, I didn't ask about gas mileage, maintenance costs, or practicality. For once, I didn't measure desire against duty. I signed the papers in silence, my chest tight, with something that felt like both triumph and grief. Triumph, because I had finally chosen myself. Grief, because it had taken me 55 years to do it. Driving it home that first evening, I rolled down the windows and let the wind whip through my hair. The engine purred smooth and confident, as if it had been waiting for me all along. Every turn of the wheel was a reminder that I was still alive, still capable, still more than a mother or a paycheck. I wasn't too old. I wasn't finished. When I parked it in the driveway, Sienna had come out to see. She was polite, but I noticed the flicker in her eyes. Surprise first, then calculation. She touched the door handle lightly and said, "Nice car, Mom. Must have cost a fortune." I laughed it off then. I told myself she was just impressed. After all, hadn't I spent her entire childhood teaching her that sacrifices were worth it if they built a better future? I gave up vacations, new clothes, dinners out, so she could graduate debt-free, so she could start her life without the weight I had carried. I thought she would understand that this car wasn't just steel and paint. It was the embodiment of every no I had ever said to myself in order to say yes to her. Now, watching Victor slide behind the wheel and Sienna beam at his side, I realized she had understood something very different. She saw not sacrifice but possession, not reward but resource, and to her resources could be redirected. That thought tightened inside me as I turned from the window, already reaching for the file drawer where my insurance papers waited. I've spent most of my adult life analyzing risk, predicting failure, and designing systems that keep people safe. As a transit safety engineer, my days were filled with monitoring routes, inspecting vehicles, and anticipating accidents before they happened. I learned to notice the little things, the subtle vibrations in a steering column, the faint smell of burnt wiring, the hesitation in a driver's eye. Suspicion was second nature. Trust had to be earned, and assumptions were a liability. So when I finally brought that metallic blue BMW home, I didn't just park it in the driveway and admire it. I walked the perimeter, lifted the hood, and noted every detail as if I were inspecting a locomotive for derailment. I wasn't paranoid. I was careful. And I knew even before Sienna had finished unpacking the welcome basket that she had inherited more than a spark of my cunning. I spent the next week preparing the car as I would any high-value transit asset. First, a GPS tracker, military grade, discreetly hidden beneath the rear bumper, connected to a secure cloud I could monitor from anywhere. It would report real-time coordinate speed and even engine activity. Then a dashcam with automatic cloud backup recording, continuously impervious to deletion or tampering. Finally, I signed up for a specialized theft and fraud insurance policy. It wasn't cheap, but I calculated the premium against the potential loss, and the peace of mind was priceless. As I installed the last of the wiring, I repeated my mantra quietly. I don't retire from foresight. 55 years of experience had taught me that the moment you relax, someone notices. The moment you assume loyalty, someone tests it. The moment you think you've earned respect, someone shows you exactly how fragile it is. I imagined the scenarios I might face: a moment of distraction, a casual borrow request from a family member, a pushy comment during brunch that seemed innocent at the time. Every possibility had a countermeasure built in: GPS and dashcam, insurance, redundant backups, locks that only I could override. This car wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. A demonstration of autonomy, security, and a refusal to be underestimated. Even as I double-checked the cloud feed, I thought of Sienna. My daughter had been responsible and thoughtful most of her life, but she also had ambition, impatience, and a sense of entitlement that could sometimes tip into recklessness. I didn't anticipate betrayal, not fully, but I anticipated risk. And now the car wasn't just a luxury, it was a shield, a sensor, a safeguard against a world that sometimes undervalues women who have reached a certain age. I sat in the driver's seat one evening, listening to the quiet hum of the engine while the setting sun glinted off the metallic paint. In my mind, I ran through every angle. What if Tyler borrowed it? What if Sienna insisted on taking it for a weekend? What if someone else, someone unexpected, decided to help me by moving it elsewhere? Each scenario had a protocol, a step-by-step plan to track, record, and protect. I didn't panic. I noted. I cataloged. I prepared. The preparation itself was a meditation, a way of asserting control over a small portion of life that had often been dictated by duty and expectation. I realized that all my careful planning, all my quiet engineering, was about more than just a car. It was about reclaiming agency over the decisions that affect me directly, about proving that foresight and experience are still valuable, even when others think age has diminished your relevance. By the time the tools were put away and the final connections tested, I leaned back in the seat and exhaled. The car was secure. Every vulnerability addressed, every possibility anticipated. I closed the BMW's door, tapped the dash one last time, and smiled faintly. Let them come. Let the keys be taken. Let the whispers and judgments start. They had no idea that every step of their plan had already been anticipated, mapped, and countered. And in that quiet moment, I reminded myself once again, I may have retired from work, but I have never retired from foresight. The next morning, I watched as Sienna casually mentioned that Victor should take the car for a spin. That was the moment I realized the real test was about to begin. Victor slid into the driver's seat of my metallic blue BMW with the sort of smug confidence only comes from someone convinced they've outsmarted the world. Sienna leaned casually against the hood phone, raised recording every second with a grin that made my stomach tighten. Tyler hovered behind her, holding his own phone, eager to capture the moment for posterity. I stayed inside the kitchen, hands gripping the edge of the counter, forcing my expression into the calm resignation they expected. From this vantage, the engine's low hum seemed to echo in the hollow spaces of the betrayal. My daughter's laughter floated across the driveway, light and teasing, but beneath it, I heard the subtle rhythm of calculation, the ticking of the GPS tracker, silently reporting every movement, every turn, every acceleration and brake. Across the street, Mrs. Patel, my elderly neighbor with a knack for noticing everything, leaned on her cane. I could see her narrowing eyes, her lips pressed in quiet judgment. She had seen Sienna's hand sweep the keys into Victor's palm, had seen the way he smirked and nodded like a boy showing off a toy. Even she didn't know I had anticipated this exact scenario. Victor started the engine, and the tires spun just slightly on the gravel before rolling smoothly down the street. The sun glinted off the hood, and I imagined it reflecting the sense of triumph in their minds. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought this was a victory. I exhaled slowly, letting my face fall into the expression they wanted, the defeated mother, too tired to protest, too frail to resist. My heart beat steadily, but inside, my mind was anything but calm. I opened my phone and checked the tracker app I had installed the week before. There it was, the little red dot moving smoothly down our street, precise and accurate. Each movement confirmed that my foresight had been flawless. Sienna, still recording, called out, "See, Mom, he knows exactly what he's doing. Isn't this better?" Tyler chuckled, nudging his father. "Told you she'd never see it coming." I felt the anger rise, not in a scream, but as a coiled energy behind my ribs. My fingers itched to pull out the insurance documents from the drawer, to review every clause that protected me against exactly this kind of deception. I had anticipated the scenario, yes, but I hadn't anticipated the audacity, the public performance, the way they wanted witnesses, video proof and validation of their sense of superiority. Across the street, Mrs. Patel shook her head ever so slightly. Even without knowing the full story, her expression betrayed the truth of what was happening, injustice in plain sight. I had anticipated Sienna's ambition, Victor's greed, Tyler's passivity, but I hadn't counted on how theatrical they would make it. Every gesture, every smirk, every camera angle felt rehearsed, like they had planned it as a mini-drama in front of the neighborhood. I closed my eyes for a moment, centering myself. Calm, deliberate, calculating, my mantra repeated silently. Every action they took was already mapped. Every mistake they made would be evidence. The GPS, the dash cam, the insurance, all pieces of a puzzle I had already solved before the first key had left the counter. Victor turned onto the main road, Sienna following his progress on her video, oblivious to the fact that every movement was being watched, logged, and recorded. I opened my phone once more, reviewing the tracker data in real time. Everything was exactly as it should be. I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible smile, letting the anger settle into resolve. They thought this was the final act, the curtain falling on their supposed victory. But in reality, this was only Act 1, and the audience, me, was already writing the script for their undoing. From the kitchen window, I watched the taillights disappear around the corner, and my mind shifted seamlessly to the next steps I had already planned. I parked in front of the Portland Police Precinct with the engine off, the morning sun glinting off my windshield. My hands rested on the steering wheel for a moment longer than necessary, not out of hesitation, but to center myself. The BMW was gone, and yet I felt more control than I had in years. Every plan I had put into motion was working silently in the background. Inside the precinct, the scent of coffee and paper greeted me. Sergeant Alvarez looked up from his desk as I approached. "Morning, Nora," he said, nodding with a familiarity that hinted at mutual respect. I handed him a detailed account of what had happened. Sienna taking the keys, Victor driving off the video recording, and my belief that this was more than a casual loan. It was coercion. Alvarez listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "We can open a report for unauthorized use of a vehicle." "Did you file anything with your insurance?" "I'm on it," I replied, pulling the folder from my tote bag. I handed him the policy documents and showed him the clauses covering theft by deception. "This isn't revenge, it's procedure." I added my voice, even leaving no room for misinterpretation. The insurance claim was straightforward. I gave them the policy number, the VIN, and the circumstances. Every detail was precise. I had anticipated their questions, and my documentation left no gaps. The clerk raised an eyebrow at the completeness of the submission. "This is thorough," she said, scanning the paperwork. "You've covered yourself well." I smiled faintly, but didn't let the satisfaction show. Planning and preparation had always been part of my nature. What mattered now was execution. By the time the police report was officially filed, I had all the reference numbers neatly recorded in a notebook. Each one was a breadcrumb that would lead me back to the BMW and perhaps to the truth about my daughter's intentions. Next, I called Dana Ruiz. Her voice came through calm and professional on the first ring. I recounted the events step by step, ensuring no detail was omitted. Dana asked the right questions about surveillance witnesses and documentation. When I mentioned the GPS tracker and the dashcam feed, I heard a subtle shift in her tone, interest edged with approval. "Excellent," she said finally. "We'll be ready to act as soon as the car's location is confirmed and we have all the evidence logged. This is solid. You've taken all the correct steps." I ended the call feeling a slight ease in my chest. The law, when navigated carefully, could be more precise and deliberate than any emotional response. Patience, documentation, and foresight. These were my allies far sharper than anger or shouting could ever be. Walking back to my car, I checked the tracker app again. The red dot had moved slightly, signaling that Victor was somewhere on the city streets. I noted the time and route, already envisioning the steps that would follow coordination with Sergeant Alvarez's documentation for Dana and the eventual retrieval of the BMW. Everything was in motion, and for the first time since the keys had left my hand, I felt the smallest flicker of anticipation. I settled into the driver's seat, opened my insurance folder once more, and began drafting the notes for the next call, knowing the real work was just beginning. The red dot on my phone blinked insistently as I sat in the driver's seat, my hands folded over the steering wheel. Meridian Auto. The GPS tracker had pinpointed the BMW there for nearly 20 minutes, now lingering just off the main road tucked behind the rusted gates of the small garage that smelled faintly of oil and paint. I tapped the dashcam app and watched the live feed stream onto my screen, the digital overlay confirming the car's exact location. Victor's smug face filled the frame. He leaned against the driver's side, giving orders with a casual authority that made my chest tighten. "Change the plates. Make it quick. No one should know it's hers." The mechanic, a wiry man with grease-stained gloves, nodded obediently, already reaching under the hood for the tools Victor had clearly scoped out in advance. I tapped the screenshot button on my phone and watched the images saved to the cloud. Each one was a moment of indisputable evidence. Victor's arrogance, his certainty that he could override my control, was captured pixel by pixel. Every motion, every smirk, every gesture would be documented. I sent the folder to Sergeant Alvarez immediately, the secure link confirming delivery, each image time-stamped. He would see what I was seeing in real time and act on it. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady the familiar rush of adrenaline that always came when a plan was set into motion. My mind cataloged everything: dashcam footage, GPS coordinates, timestamps, Victor's words. Each piece would form a narrative so clear that even an attorney would have no doubt about the coercion and intent. Dana Ruiz would have the full picture, and the law would move faster than their confidence could withstand. Victor bent over the front bumper, a wrench clutched in his hand. The car's license plate reflected the garage lights, dull and scratched from years of use, waiting to be swapped for something temporary, something untraceable. He glanced over his shoulder at the camera that I knew Sienna was keeping trained on him, grinning like a director, satisfied with her scene. I tapped another screenshot, then another. Each image reinforced a pattern: deliberate action, coercion, and an attempt to conceal ownership. Every smug glance and dismissive word now served as proof against them. They believed they were acting in secrecy, but I had designed the system specifically for this possibility. Tyler appeared in the frame, phone in hand, gesturing to Victor. "Hurry up. Don't get caught." I suppressed a shiver. They thought the video was their shield, their claim to control. They didn't realize that the same recording was also my sword. I double-checked the tracker, zooming in on the route Victor had taken to reach the garage. Each turn aligned perfectly with the movements I anticipated. Even the slight pause at the corner where he checked over his shoulder confirmed the meticulous nature of his plan, and also how easy it would be to prove premeditation. I tapped my insurance folder open again, reviewing the clauses covering theft by deception and unauthorized use. Every element I had set up tracker dashcam policy was performing exactly as intended. Their hubris, their certainty that they could take my car without consequence, was transforming into tangible, undeniable evidence. The mechanic now bent over the front fender, glanced at Victor nervously. The subtle tension betrayed that even he sensed this was not a routine job. Victor waved him off, confident, laughing softly, unaware that their every action was already being traced, recorded, and time-stamped. I sent the final batch of screenshots to Dana, each labeled meticulously with time and location. She would have everything she needed to coordinate with Alvarez to act decisively when the moment came. Their scheme, orchestrated with such arrogance, was unraveling in real time without them knowing it. I leaned back in my seat, tapping my fingers lightly against the leather, my mind already planning the next steps. Communication with Alvarez, confirmation from Dana, and preparation for the confrontation that would reclaim what was mine. The red dot on the GPS blinked steadily, silent, unwavering, marking every second of their overconfidence. As I watched Victor direct the mechanic one last time, I realized that their arrogance had already betrayed them. Every move they had made, every decision they thought clever, was now evidence that would undo them completely. I closed the app, setting my phone down, and let my thoughts shift forward, plotting the precise sequence that would ensure the BMW returned to its rightful owner where it had always belonged. The mechanic froze mid-motion, wrench in hand, as Victor's phone rang sharply against the hood of my BMW. He cursed under his breath, swiping to answer with exaggerated irritation. I could hear snippets of his side of the conversation through the dashcam audio. Demands, threats, the kind of sharp, insistent tone that only debt collectors can wield. "Yeah, I know. I'll handle it," he muttered, though his voice cracked slightly. The pause between sentences betrayed panic. Even as he tried to sound composed, there was a tremor in his hand that the dashcam picked up clearly. The mechanic glanced nervously at Victor, who waved him off. "Just hold on a sec." Victor barked into the phone, his tone attempting authority, but failing to mask the tightness around his jaw. I watched as his face went pale, his confidence slipping with each word on the other end of the line. I leaned back slightly in the driver's seat, a faint smile forming at the corners of my mouth. They're already drowning before they steal, I thought, letting the satisfaction settle quietly in my chest. All their preparation, their careful plotting, their sense of invincibility. It was unraveling under circumstances they hadn't considered. Victor's phone call continued, his voice rising, as he tried to bluff, insisting to the collector that everything was fine, that the payment would come through. But each vague promise, each hesitation was recorded, time-stamped, logged. Even if they hadn't realized it yet, these moments were quietly eroding the narrative they thought they controlled. The mechanic shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to continue with the plate swap or wait for Victor to regain composure. He glanced at the dashcam, the subtle red light in the corner, signaling that everything was being streamed and recorded. Even he seemed aware in that instant that something about this operation was off, though he didn't know what. Victor waved again, attempting to return to the task at hand. He muttered, "Don't stop. We've got to get this done," and bent toward the front fender. But the phone continued to ring. Each vibration seemed to echo in the garage like a metronome counting down his confidence. I tapped my finger lightly on the steering wheel, watching through the app as his panic manifested in small gestures, shifting weight, tightening his grip on the phone, a foot tapping against the concrete. The arrogance I had seen in the driveway, the sense of complete control, was dissolving. Every second of distraction, every flinch became a record I could use. The dashcam captured it all: the frown on Victor's face, the tension in his posture, the helpless glance he cast toward the mechanic. I sent another batch of screenshots to Sergeant Alvarez, each one labeled with precise time and location. Dana would have a full record of every moment of stress, every lapse in their confidence. I closed my eyes briefly, savoring the quiet satisfaction. Years of planning, foresight, and attention to detail were converging in a way that was almost poetic. The thieves thought they were in command. They had not realized that circumstance, chance, and preparation could conspire against them faster than they could react. Victor finally ended the call, muttering more curses under his breath. He tried to straighten, attempting to reassert his authority over the mechanic and the situation. But the subtle shift in his demeanor, the tremor that didn't fully disappear, told me everything I needed to know. I tapped the tracker app, noting his next move as the red dot began to creep toward the garage exit. The sequence of events I had predicted was unfolding almost exactly as I had anticipated. Their overconfidence had become a liability, and my preparation had transformed every misstep into evidence. I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. The BMW was still technically theirs in the moment, but the control they thought they had was slipping, and the law, the insurance, and my foresight were already waiting to reclaim it. I checked the dashcam one last time before turning my attention to the next steps, coordinating with Alvarez, and preparing Dana for the confrontation that would finally bring them to account. I was reviewing the tracker feed in the quiet of my living room when my phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications stacked up: Instagram, text messages, email alerts. I tapped the first one, hesitating only for a heartbeat before seeing the post. Sienna had uploaded a new reel. The caption was simple, cruelly confident. "Too old, too fragile. Dad drives better." The video played automatically. Victor leaned against the BMW, smirking at the camera, while Sienna framed every shot with the kind of care that made it obvious she thought she was clever. Tyler hovered in the background, filming from another angle, nodding in approval. Every laugh, every glance, every little tilt of Victor's head broadcast to her followers. I sat still, letting the images sink in. There it was, the arrogance they thought would protect them, now available to anyone with an internet connection. The neighbors, the distant relatives, anyone scrolling aimlessly, they were witnesses. My anger could have boiled over, but I forced it down, steadying my breathing. I reminded myself that every action they took, every gesture, was already being logged elsewhere. The red dot on the tracker blinked on my phone, the dashcam feed still streaming silently to the cloud. I swiped through the comments. Some were lighthearted, mocking, unaware of the truth. Others were sharper, questioning why the elderly driver was being denied his car. The mix of ridicule and concern gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. The public was seeing what they thought was a private joke, but to me, each comment was a thread in a web of proof I could use. I opened my email to forward the link to Dana Ruiz. Her response came almost immediately. "This is perfect," she typed. "Golden evidence. Not only do we have coercion in real time, but we also have intent, premeditation, and social proof that they treated this as a performance. Keep sending everything." Every comment, every share strengthens the case. I leaned back in the chair, letting the faint weight of relief settle across my shoulders. The arrogance I had been tracking, predicting, and documenting was now doing double duty. It wasn't just their downfall in the making, it was tangible proof delivered directly into my hands, time-stamped, public, and indisputable. Sienna had thought she was in control, using social media to amplify her triumph. Instead, she had created a record of every insult, every dismissive word, and every act of coercion. The performance she intended to immortalize as a victory now served as the clearest documentation of wrongdoing. Each view, each replay, each screenshot sent to Dana cemented the narrative in the eyes of anyone who would eventually examine the situation. I glanced at the tracker one more time. Victor was idling in the garage, still unaware that everything he had done was being recorded, logged, and archived. His confidence had blinded him to the evidence that I had anticipated gathering before the first key ever left my counter. I tapped the share button, sending the reel and the initial screenshots to Dana with careful notes on timestamps and locations. She acknowledged receipt, immediately instructing me to continue capturing every angle, every moment, every post that could further illustrate the orchestration behind this theft. I let myself smile faintly. Their overconfidence, their need to display the act publicly, had inadvertently strengthened my position. Every boast, every laugh, every angle Sienna had chosen to immortalize would now become a cornerstone of the case. The mockery was theirs, but the leverage was mine. As I closed my phone, I leaned back in my chair and thought about the sequence that would follow: next, police coordination, live tracking, and preparation for the confrontation that would bring the BMW home. The public display had done its work, and the next stage of reclaiming what was mine was ready to unfold. The sun hadn't fully risen when we pulled up in the unmarked police vehicle. Dana sat beside me, her expression calm but sharp. Every detail accounted for in her mind. The GPS tracker had guided us to the exact spot at Meridian Auto. I could see the gates of the garage ahead, flanked by rusted fencing and the faint smell of oil. Sergeant Alvarez rolled down the window, giving a subtle nod to the officers waiting near the entrance. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, gripping my hands together in the lap of my coat. "Let's go." We walked toward the garage doors, the quiet determination in our steps matching the low hum of anticipation in my chest. The dashcam feed on my phone confirmed that Victor was there, leaning over the BMW, talking to the mechanic in hushed tones, gesturing toward the front plate with the kind of authority only someone who believed no one could stop him could muster. Alvarez signaled. The officers moved in swiftly, opening the doors and announcing themselves. "Portland Police. Everyone stay where you are." Victor spun around, his eyes widening as the first uniformed officers entered the garage. The mechanic froze mid-motion wrench, suspended in the air, sweat appearing across his brow. His indecision was instantaneous. He had no idea what to do next. Victor cursed, fumbling to hold on to some shred of control. "What this isn't," he started, but Alvarez cut him off with a firm hand gesture. "I suggest you stand still," Alvarez said evenly, and the command carried weight. Dana stepped forward, her presence deliberate. "Victor Hart, you are being observed and documented for the unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, coercion, and attempted misrepresentation of ownership," she said. Her tone left no room for negotiation, no room for bluffing. Victor's confident posture crumbled. He looked at me briefly, perhaps hoping for some hint of compromise, some sign that I would intervene. I met his gaze directly, letting the weight of every year, every calculated precaution, and every suppressed emotion land squarely on him. "Still think I'm too old?" I asked quietly, but every officer within earshot understood the authority in my voice. The mechanic, realizing the situation had escalated beyond his control, lowered his wrench, slowly, eyes wide. He glanced at the BMW, then at Victor, then back at the officers. His panic was clear. He had become an unwilling participant in their scheme. Alvarez signaled, and two officers approached the car gently but firmly, taking possession of the keys and verifying the VIN against my paperwork. Every action was methodical, precise, following the procedures Dana and I had prepared. The dashcam and tracker feeds were referenced, confirming the exact timeline of events. Victor sputtered, trying to argue, but every protest only emphasized the evidence stacked against him. The BMW, my metallic blue testament to years of sacrifice, was now impounded as evidence pending the court order Dana had already prepared. Every inch of the car, every detail, every moment Victor had hoped to manipulate was now under scrutiny and control. I stepped closer, letting the camera capture the moment. Dana followed, ensuring documentation was flawless. Victor's face registered the shift from dominance to humiliation, the arrogance evaporating under the precision of law and preparation. I took a deep breath, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. Years of planning, every precaution, every measure had led to this moment. The car was safe, the evidence secured, and the arrogance that had seemed untouchable had crumbled. I turned, slightly watching, as Alvarez made notes and coordinated the impoundment. My phone confirmed the tracker was still live, showing the BMW securely in police custody. The world had shifted in an instant, the balance of control firmly in my hands. I looked back at Victor one last time, letting the words sink in. "Still think I'm too old?" He flinched, and I knew he had understood. Every move, every plan, every ounce of hubris had been undone in real time, visible and undeniable. As the officers began to escort him and the mechanic from the garage, Dana whispered instructions for the next steps, court filing statements, and ensuring every piece of evidence was cataloged. I followed, my mind already turning toward the strategy that would fully reclaim what was mine and establish the precedent they had underestimated. I walked into the bank with a quiet determination that masked the storm beneath. The polished floors and familiar hum of computers greeted me, but my focus was entirely on the task at hand. I had spent years trusting Sienna with small responsibilities, then larger ones, believing that bloodlines and shared history ensured loyalty. Today, I was about to test that assumption and revoke it entirely. "Good morning, Ms. Ellison," the branch manager said, looking up from her desk. Recognition passed briefly between us, a nod, acknowledging decades of routine transactions. "How can I help you today?" I placed my papers on her desk, my hands steady. "I'm here to revoke the power of attorney I granted my daughter years ago," I said. "Effective. Immediately, she will no longer have access to any of my accounts, financial or otherwise." Her eyebrows rose slightly, and she nodded, flipping through the records. "I see. Do you have identification in the original documents?" I handed them over, watching carefully as she made the changes in the system. Every click, every confirmation solidified the separation I had been forced to enact. The control that had once been shared reluctantly, trustingly, was no longer hers. Next came the accounts themselves. I moved funds into new accounts under my sole management, ensuring that every dollar, every balance, every transaction remained beyond her reach. Years of careful planning, of quiet discipline and foresight, now protected my assets from someone who had shown that entitlement could override familial respect. Finally, I met with my attorney Dana Ruiz to revise my will. Sienna's inheritance, once substantial, was reduced to the bare minimum required by law. Every detail of my estate was reassigned to my niece Elena, to charitable foundations, and to provisions for my own care in the years ahead. Blood ties had failed to guarantee responsibility. I had learned that respect and loyalty are not inherited, they are earned. I signed the documents, each stroke of the pen a measure of regained autonomy. The weight lifted slightly from my shoulders, replaced by a sober clarity. I wasn't acting out of anger or revenge. I was acting to preserve the dignity and security I had spent a lifetime building. Family could not override broken trust. Love could not outweigh recklessness. Stepping out of the bank, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. Sienna had been my daughter, yes, but she had proven that shared blood was not enough to safeguard either property or principle. I would continue to love cautiously, but control financial, legal, and personal was once again mine. The BMW, the tracker, the dash cam. All of it had been only the beginning. Now, with my account secured and my will rewritten, the next steps would ensure that every piece of this betrayal had consequences. And with that thought, I turned toward my office to begin the careful planning for the legal actions still to come, knowing the confrontation with the law was only the next chapter. Dana Ruiz called me into her office mid-morning with a stack of printed documents and her laptop open to a secure portal. She didn't speak at first, only handed me the first page of subpoenaed text messages between Sienna, Tyler, and Victor. My hands shook slightly as I read the messages, each one revealing a layer of planning I hadn't fully anticipated. Dad's retirement account is almost gone. We can't let the mortgage fall behind. I'll handle Mom's car, he won't know until it's too late, one message read. It hit me like a punch. Sienna had orchestrated everything, every step, every detail, every coercive move under the guise of protecting the family finances. Her reasoning: mortgage foreclosure, practicality, survival. But practicality didn't justify theft, and survival didn't excuse deception. Tyler's messages were passive, almost indecisive, like a man who wanted the outcome without the responsibility. If Sienna says it's okay, I guess I'll go along, he typed casually. It was a shrug in words, a moral absence that left me dizzy. And Victor. Oh, Victor. His texts were pure opportunism. I'll take it. Don't worry about me getting caught. We'll be careful, he wrote, the arrogance thick even in print. He had seen the opportunity and seized it without hesitation, confident in his own cleverness, oblivious to the consequences I had meticulously set in motion. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady the surge of emotions: betrayal, anger, disbelief. I had paid for Sienna's college tuition, guided her through adulthood, financed her wedding, and yet, this was the gratitude she returned: manipulation, deceit, and a plan to steal what I had earned. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar I had set aside for her security now felt like fuel for a betrayal I had not anticipated in such cold detail. Dana watched me carefully, her voice calm and steady. This is solid evidence. Intent is clearly documented. Premeditation is established, and each participant's role is defined. She tapped her finger on Victor's name. He's not just a participant. He's exploiting the situation for personal gain. Tyler's passivity doesn't excuse him. Sienna is the architect, and her reasoning is irrelevant legally. All we need now is to coordinate with the authorities and file the necessary motions. I exhaled slowly, letting the anger recede into calculation. The reality of what I was holding in my hands, the black and white motives captured in text, time-stamped and clear, was more powerful than any confrontation I could have staged on my own. They had documented their own crimes, revealing not just action, but intent, not just theft, but design. I skimmed the messages again, focusing on Sienna's tone, the way she justified every step to Tyler and Victor. Each line reinforced a pattern: pressure, coercion, manipulation, and the belief that familial ties allowed her to overstep boundaries. Every word, every plan now became a building block in the case Dana would present. I closed the printouts, laying them neatly on the desk. The betrayal was deep, but so was the clarity. Bloodlines love duty. They were irrelevant when weighed against calculated actions and documented intent. I met Dana's eyes, my voice steady, but firm. We move forward. Right. This is enough to take the next step. She nodded. Yes. This is the point where everything becomes undeniable. We can act decisively now. I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. The texts revealed motives as clearly as the tracker revealed location. Every secret plan, every justification, every attempt to manipulate me had been laid bare, and as I gathered the documents to prepare for the legal filings, I realized that the next phase, the confrontation with the law, would finally translate this betrayal into consequences they couldn't ignore. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and tension. I sat beside Donna Ruiz, my hands folded over the edge of the table, watching the door as Sienna and Victor entered, flanked by Tyler. Their confidence seemed to fill the room as if the very air might bend in their favor. But I had spent months preparing for this exact moment, and nothing about their arrogance could touch the evidence we had collected. The judge, a woman in her early 50s with a reputation for impartiality, called the hearing to order. This matter concerns the unauthorized use of property and allegations of coercion and fraud within a familial context, she began. Her gaze swept the room, and I felt the weight of authority settle comfortably on my shoulders. Dana began presenting the case. First, the social media post Sienna's Instagram reel displayed in full on the screen behind her. The caption scrolled slowly. "Too old, too fragile, dad drives better." Each comment, each view count, each share was recorded meticulously. Next came the dashcam footage and GPS logs. The red dot moving along the Meridian auto route appeared on the large monitor, precisely time-stamped, confirming every movement of the BMW since it had left my driveway. The dashcam feed played simultaneously, Victor directing the mechanic Tyler, filming Sienna, narrating the supposed logic behind their actions. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. When it was Sienna's turn to speak, she attempted to frame the narrative. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "everything we did was for my mother's safety. We were concerned about the car's power and her age. We only acted in her best interest." I shook my head subtly, signaling to Dana that we were ready. When it was my turn, I rose to testify. My voice was calm, measured, carrying the authority of years spent observing, analyzing, and protecting. "This wasn't care," I said, looking at the judge and then at Sienna, her gaze briefly faltering under mine. "This was theft, plain and simple. My car was taken without consent, and the entire act was orchestrated for the benefit of Victor and facilitated by my own daughter. Concern for my safety was a pretense, a justification for a plan designed to deprive me of property and control over my own assets." Dana presented the subpoenaed texts, each one highlighting Sienna's orchestration, Victor's opportunism, and Tyler's passive complicity. Each message was time-stamped, each motive laid bare. The judge read them carefully occasionally, nodding, her expression unreadable but attentive. I allowed myself a measured glance at the red dot still visible on my phone, a silent confirmation that the BMW remained secure and traceable, a constant in a room filled with arguments and justifications. Sienna tried to interject, but Dana's rebuttal was concise and firm. Intent is clear. Coercion is documented. Ownership is indisputable. The actions taken by Victor and Sienna constitute theft and unauthorized use. The judge leaned forward slightly, reviewing all submitted materials. Given the clarity of the evidence presented, the social media posts, the dashcam footage, the GPS logs, and the testimonial provided by the rightful owner, the court finds that the vehicle must be returned immediately to Ms. Nora Ellison. Additionally, a restraining order is issued preventing the defendants from interfering with her property in any manner going forward. A quiet shock passed through the room. Victor's jaw tightened. Sienna's face flushed, the confidence they had carried into the room cracking visibly. Tyler looked down at the table, muttering something under his breath. I returned to my seat, the weight in my chest lifting slightly. The law had aligned with foresight, preparation, and undeniable proof. Family excuses, rehearsed arguments, and public displays of mockery held no sway when measured against clear, documented reality. Dana whispered softly, "This is the foundation. From here, We reclaim what's yours and ensure accountability. I nodded, eyes still on the screen showing the GPS feed. The BMW was already moving back toward safety, guided by the certainty that evidence had won over manipulation. And as the gavel came down, signaling the formal conclusion of the hearing, I felt the first tangible shift of power since the keys had left my hands. The fallout came faster than I expected, though. Perhaps it shouldn't have. Word traveled quickly once the court ruling became public, and the ripple effect was immediate. Victor's reputation as a chauffeur for high-profile clients evaporated overnight. Companies that had once trusted him with luxury vehicles suddenly questioned his judgment. Phone calls went unanswered, contracts quietly terminated, and the debts he had ignored for so long became urgent, impossible to evade. Tyler wasn't spared either. The video of the Instagram reel combined with the dashcam footage that had gone public in court filings made its way to his professional network. The clients who had once valued his discretion now saw only the collusion, the passive complicity, and the moral lapse. His contract with a major events company was canceled, the news delivered with the polite but firm detachment that made clear he would not be hired again. Sienna's anger was immediate and directed squarely at me. I had expected resentment, perhaps even outrage, but the intensity surprised me. She stormed into my office, her face flushed, eyes blazing. "Fix this, Mom. Do something. The mortgage. The loans. Everything's falling apart." I sat back in my chair, fingers lightly tapping the edge of the desk. My expression remained calm, steady, unwavering. "I already did," I said simply. The words carried more weight than any argument she could make. I had anticipated the consequences of their actions, had prepared for the financial fallout, and had secured every account, every asset, every contingency. Their panic was noise against a foundation I had already reinforced. She threw herself into a chair across from me, hands gripping the armrests. This was supposed to be for the family I was trying to protect us, and now everything's collapsing. Her voice cracked, oscillating between anger and desperation. "Protection doesn't come from theft or manipulation," I replied evenly. "It comes from accountability, from foresight, from doing what's right, not what's convenient. I have corrected the course. The mortgage is safe. Your father's accounts are secure. The BMW is back where it belongs. I've already done everything required to stabilize the situation." Her mouth opened, then closed, words failing her. Tyler and Victor's errors had left a trail of ruin, but my intervention, prepared long before they realized the consequences, ensured that the foundation of what was mine and what I had chosen to protect remained intact. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of my office heater. I allowed Sienna a few moments to feel the weight of the reality she had created, the consequences of choices made in greed and arrogance. I leaned back, watching her deflate under the gravity of her own actions. Bloodlines might have connected us, but trust, respect, and responsibility were not inherited. They were earned, and when neglected, they left walls to crumble and relationships to fracture. I turned my attention to the phone, ready to make the next calls, prepare the next filings, and ensure that the repercussions continued to reinforce the lesson: manipulation and greed may rise, but evidence, preparation, and principle always hold. And with that resolve, I prepared to face the next stage of this family reckoning. Sienna cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes wide, her voice trembling with desperation. "Mom, please, we'll lose the house. The mortgage, everything's going under. You have to fix this. Fix." I set the coffee pot down, my hands steady despite the storm inside. I had anticipated this moment, expected the pleading, the emotional manipulation, the frantic appeal to blood ties. And yet the weight of those words still struck me, pulling me back to the nights I had spent working extra shifts just to keep her tuition paid, the weekends I had sacrificed, the hours I had spent tutoring, cleaning, saving, and planning so that her life would be easier than mine had been. I remember, I said softly, letting the memory settle in the room like a quiet shadow. I remember every sleepless night, every double shift, every dollar set aside so that you could have opportunities I never had. Her lips quivered, but she didn't respond. She didn't need to. The room itself held the history between us. Every hallway, every photograph, every reminder of birthdays and graduations spoke of the sacrifices I had made in silence. And now, standing before me, Sienna seemed to demand that all of that effort be repaid with obedience, with submission to her sense of urgency, with forgiveness for a betrayal that cut far deeper than the loss of a car or the anxiety over a mortgage. I can't, I said, my voice calm but firm. I met her eyes searching for the child I had nurtured, the daughter who had once clung to my leg during thunderstorms. The girl who had trusted me completely. She was still there, somewhere beneath the layers of arrogance and fear. But I had to separate the child I loved from the choices she had made as an adult. You have to understand, Sienna said, her voice breaking. If the bank forecloses everything we've built our home, our lives will collapse. I thought you'd help. I thought. I shook my head gently. I won't rescue betrayal. I won't undo the consequences of choices made at my expense. Love doesn't erase responsibility, and blood ties don't grant immunity from the consequences of dishonesty and coercion. Her shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her as the reality sank in. I remembered every year spent ensuring she never had to experience financial instability like I had. Every sacrifice, every moment of self-denial had been an act of love. But love, I reminded myself, did not mean tolerating theft or manipulation. It did not mean allowing respect and trust to be trampled because someone claimed urgency or obligation as justification. You always, she started, then faltered, realizing that the words would not persuade me. I could see the panic in her eyes, but also the faint recognition that her manipulations had been anticipated, documented, and rendered ineffective by the systems I had put in place. I took a step closer, lowering my voice, but keeping it resolute. I did everything I could to protect the foundation, the house, the BMW, and every asset that is rightfully mine. The rest, the consequences of your actions, are yours to face. That is the only way you learn that choices matter, that respect matters, and that manipulation has limits. She looked away, shame and fear mixing with remnants of defiance. I could feel the tension in the air, the fragile thread of our relationship bending, but not breaking. This refusal was painful, yes, but necessary. Boundaries were not cruelty. They were survival. I turned back to the counter, picking up the folder with insurance documents and legal notes. I've done what was necessary to secure the house, the mortgage, and my life. You will face the consequences of your actions, and that is final. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Mom? I didn't reply. My silence said everything. The love remained, but the betrayal had its price. And as I prepared to leave the kitchen, the next phase of ensuring accountability, consequence, and restoration began to take shape in my mind. The settlement came quietly, without fanfare, but with every detail I had anticipated. Victor paid damages for the misuse of the BMW, covering both the financial and legal costs incurred. Sienna reluctantly agreed to cover the repairs to the car and other damages that her impulsive actions had caused. I made sure Dana documented every payment, every signed acknowledgement of responsibility, leaving nothing to interpretation or future dispute. A public retraction was posted on social media, drafted and approved to remove any traces of mockery or manipulation. Sienna's reel, the comments, the caption, they all vanished from the platforms where she had once paraded her sense of victory. The post acknowledged her wrongdoing and confirmed that the BMW belonged entirely to me, restoring the truth to anyone who had seen the spectacle. I reviewed each document, each transaction, each confirmation. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about accountability. Every dollar, every signed paper, every retraction was a lesson in consequence, a reminder that decisions, even by family, carry weight. I felt no joy in Victor's discomfort or Sienna's embarrassment. My satisfaction was in clarity, in the restoration of order, in the firm assertion that betrayal has boundaries, and those boundaries are enforceable. When Dana handed me the final folder, she said quietly, "You've done everything by the book. Nothing can be disputed. The BMW is back. Finances are secured, and the consequences are clear. You've done this without letting anger drive you." I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. Anger had been present, yes, but it had been tempered by preparation, foresight, and discipline. The settlement was not about vengeance. It was about making sure that trust, once broken, came at a cost. Money could not erase the pain, but it could reinforce the lesson, making clear that betrayal carries tangible consequences. Sienna and Victor both approached me later, hesitant, awkward. They offered apologies, some genuine, some carefully worded, but I held the space for them without softening my stance. "Apologies are noted," I said, my voice steady. "But accountability is what ensures this doesn't happen again. The consequences are yours to carry." They left their expressions a mixture of relief and lingering tension. Tyler hovered in the background, a reminder that even passive participation has repercussions. I allowed myself a small, controlled exhale, feeling the weight of months of tension begin to lift. The BMW gleamed in the driveway, fully restored, each scratch, and Mark accounted for each repair funded by those responsible. I reminded myself that restitution isn't always about closure or satisfaction. It's about ensuring that actions have consequences, that lessons are learned, and that the person wronged can reclaim control without compromising their principles. I had not sought revenge, and I had not needed it. Justice carefully applied had been enough. With the final forms filed and confirmations secured, I turned my attention to the next steps, maintaining vigilance, reinforcing boundaries, and ensuring that the lessons of betrayal and foresight would continue to guide not only my life, but the lessons this family would never forget. I arrived at the library early, arranging the chairs and setting up the projector with a quiet focus. The seminar was modest in scale, but its purpose felt larger than any audience could measure. Years of experience, years of caution, and the lessons from the BMW ordeal were ready to be shared. Mrs. Patel appeared shortly after, smiling warmly. "You've done a lot for this neighborhood," she said, helping me distribute flyers to the tables. Her presence was reassuring, a reminder that support comes from those who have observed, endured, and understood. As seniors trickled in, I began with a simple statement: protect your titles. Protect yourselves. Ownership isn't just about property. It's about dignity, security, and knowing your rights. I showed examples from my own experience, carefully selecting moments from the ordeal without naming anyone, that illustrated the consequences of inattention and misplaced trust. Questions arose quickly, practical ones about banking, insurance, and legal safeguards. I answered each with precision, drawing on the documentation, the insurance clauses, and the legal strategies I had employed. I demonstrated how small lapses, even with good intentions, could escalate, and how foresight and preparation were essential tools for anyone, especially seniors. Mrs. Patel assisted with anecdotes, reinforcing points with local knowledge. "It's not just about the paperwork," she reminded them. "It's about awareness, observation, and knowing who to trust." Her words resonated. I saw nods, a few murmurs of agreement, and the quiet recognition that our community could benefit from lessons drawn from my personal experience. At the end, several seniors approached me, gratitude in their eyes. They shared their own fears, their experiences with financial advisors, family disputes, and the sense of vulnerability that comes with age. I listened, responded, and offered guidance, feeling the energy shift from anxiety to empowerment. Each question became an opportunity to turn humiliation into education. I realized, as I watched the attendees leave with handouts and contact information, that the sting of betrayal and the lessons learned from it were no longer mine alone. They were a collective resource, a shared understanding of how to maintain dignity and security in a world that doesn't always honor it. Packing up, I felt a quiet pride. The BMW, the court, the settlement. They had been steps to reclaim control. Now the knowledge gained from those challenges could strengthen others, turning scars into guidance. I glanced at Mrs. Patel as she closed the door behind the last attendee. The next phase awaited continuing vigilance, applying lessons, and ensuring that both my assets and my hard-earned wisdom remained intact. The dawn was pale and still as I slid into the driver's seat of the BMW. Steam rose gently from the coffee cup in the cup holder, filling the cabin with warmth and routine. I took a deep breath, fingers resting lightly on the wheel, appreciating the quiet hum of the engine beneath me. For the first time in weeks, the car felt fully mine again, untainted by manipulation, reclaiming the peace that had always been its right. My phone buzzed, pulling my attention. A brief notification the insurance claim had been officially closed in my favor. All repairs, all damages, all costs had been acknowledged and resolved. The red tape, the oversight, the months of preparation, all confirmed. The system I had trusted, the meticulous planning I had enacted, had paid off in full measure. I exhaled slowly, letting the realization settle. I wasn't too old. I wasn't too weak. I had been underestimated, yes, by those who believed that age equated to fragility, and that experience could be dismissed as irrelevant. But every precaution, every backup, every calculated step had proved the contrary. The quiet engine beneath me, steady and unassuming, was a reminder wisdom endures where arrogance falters. As I drove through the streets, the soft glow of the morning light reflecting off the metallic blue paint, I allowed myself a small, private smile. Each turn of the wheel, each press of the pedal, each moment of control reinforced what I already knew. Foresight and preparation were far sharper than any display of force or anger. The city awoke around me, traffic picking up, neighbors stirring. I followed the familiar route home, calm, deliberate, every motion intentional. The BMW was no longer just a car. It was a testament to autonomy, patience, and resilience. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth spread, and thought quietly to myself they had underestimated me, but the lesson was clear, permanent, and undeniable. And as the morning stretched ahead, I felt the rhythm of the engine echo, the steady pulse of regained control guiding me toward the next chapter of life with clarity and certainty.